Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our next session, which is about digital health innovation. Our theme today is patient data as a driver of innovation for biotech. So please let me thank the organizing committee of this conference for the invitation to today's session, and also I would like to invite a distinguished panel of speakers, starting from Professor Ioannis Xenarios from the University Hospital of Lausanne, Health 2030 Genome Center, and co-founder of TwinEdge. Anybody back? Eirini Schlosser, founder and CEO of Dyania Health, driving AI-powered clinical research and patient engagement. Kostis Kaggelides, CEO of Gnomon Informatics, an expert in digital health platforms and interoperability. And last but not least, Yannis Pandis, the site lead of Pfizer Center of Digital Innovation in Thessaloniki, who is turning patient data into global biotech solutions. So together, they are bringing perspectives that span the entire journey from research to clinical application to large-scale innovation. So we all recognize the power of data, and today's speakers will help us understand how they can accelerate biotech innovation. So to keep the discussion interactive, we'll follow a simple storyline in 3 steps. Foundation, why patient data must be structured and interoperable. Applications, how structured data enables biotech and digital health innovation. And ecosystem, what partnerships and collaboration models are needed to scale and sustain those innovations. So without further ado, I would like to start from Kostis. So we speak about patient data, and the first challenge is often technical, making sure systems really talk to each other. But interoperability is not only a technical term, it directly affects how research is conducted, how care is delivered, and how patients engage with their own data. So, Kostis, I would like your thoughts about this. How can you explain interoperability and how it can accelerate clinical research and drive innovation in biotechnology?
Thank you. Well, you know, it's in such a vast and complex domain as healthcare, and usually changes in the provision of healthcare take time, and some of the meaning of things happening are changing. So, you know, sometimes we discuss about interoperability and we consider it a technical issue that it works. You know, and we have to overcome it, and we also created now a big common understanding in our procurement of national healthcare system about what are the technical aspects of interoperability, but it's mostly and actually a design issue. That if you miss it, you are going to lead to teleonomic, I'm using these nice Greek word solutions, you know, like, but you can forecast of meaning to provide to specific things, and that breaks the conceptual integrity of doing things like people are discussing about here. Like, for instance, the longitudinal healthcare record. But who is the stakeholder, you know, in this domain of thinking that will say we need a longitudinal healthcare record because we should have. In biology, as we discussed in this, I mean, I followed a few sessions that it was pointed out as a key issue to have real population clinical studies, advancing search for biomarkers, drug discovery, and you should have data that are of quality, that are not observational clinical studies. And how can you get this data and utilize it practically and bring down the cost of all this? So the good news is that digital health, you know, overcoming all these problems, overpasses these issues. And particularly in our case, in Gnomon, the point that we took is that we considered that the patient-centered approach, where the patient has a big stake on covering these needs for his own good, is the way to go. And that's the big, you know, basis of design thinking in health.
Okay, and Professor Xenarios, so in terms of research, how does interoperability fit in? And beyond clinical systems, where do you see interoperability in genomic, omics, and clinical data sets coming together to accelerate research?
I think one of the key problems we have, all hospitals are not there really to treat patients, they are there to actually have a tax cost and econometrics. The foundation of it is that all of us in this audience have our own genetics. We didn't choose our parents. Sometimes we should have, but we haven't chosen our parents. But some of our genetics also influence of this. And the genetics is actually making up, and that depends on the audience I have in front, 51% if there are more geneticists in the room, or 49% if there are more environmentalists in the room. But at the end of the day, this is the foundation of the reason why drugs do not work across everyone. That's why we want to have more precision and be precise and have a better outcome for the drugs. And this is actually where the interoperability has its cornerstone. I have a famous singer, this is Egyptian, that was singing Non, je n'ai pas changé, je suis toujours la même, that's Dalida, for the one that speaks French here. Our genome do not change from womb to tomb. We're going to be infected by virus, bacteria, we might have a cancer or not, we might be prolonged or have a prognostic for a certain type of disease. This is the cornerstone, and I think one of the interoperability aspects and range of that is really to make it much more personal, individuals, yet not forgetting that we are not treating the individual, we are treating a population when it comes to health. And that's really the two equations that we have to deal with.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of applications, Eirini, once data is structured and trustworthy, let's assume that we get to that stage, what can we do with it, and what are the promising areas in terms of AI, and given your background in this, where do you see things going?
Yes, absolutely. So first, I think the first part of that sentence is quite important. So we're not actually working anywhere globally with structured, clean, accurate data. And we also do not have medical consensus as to what the questions we are asking even mean. So when you have two physicians debate the interpretation of the term symptomatic heart failure, that means that we don't have clear medical definitions of what we're even looking for. Furthermore, those definitions are changing as research continues to develop. And so if you're looking to analyze any data set, number one, you need to have it organized in a structure whereby there are clean and objective and clinically relevant terms, even defining the field names. And that is not the case, even in some of the top institutions in the world. And so most of our time is actually, at the moment, not just spent on the AI, but first and foremost, cleaning that data in a way that can be then ingested by an AI-based system. And so I think that should not be underestimated, because most of the data schemas have really not been designed for scale within an AI environment. They've been designed for billing purposes, for one hospital to exist at a time, and certainly not for hospitals to be buying other hospitals. So when we go in one and there's, they've acquired another hospital and there are 2 million entries under one medical record number. That's a lot of compute.
So beyond syntactic issues, I'm not sure about the semantics as well.
Yeah.
And Yannis, I'm sure you've kind of, two microphones for you. I'm sure you've dealt with these kind of problems in Thessaloniki, in the digital, in the center there, and you've been working with applications around biotech. What kind of issues have you seen, and how can we overcome the problems that the two speakers mentioned?
Thanks for the question, and thanks for the invite to be here for this really nice forum. So you're right, these are the kind of things that we think about every day up in Thessaloniki, but just to mention for those who don't know, it's not just a digital centre now. We've expanded to an R&D as well as a pharmacovigilance centre of excellence, plus we have our global business hub there, so there's a big investment there. And I'll get to the question now, if we draw the parallel and include our Athens colleagues here, which is pretty much what we're trying to build, is a mini Pfizer that we can start addressing these global issues. We're not focusing on Greek issues alone, so it's teams that focus on global problems. This, the standardization, the right use of terminologies is something that we do all the time. So traditionally you would go to vendors who would look at cleaning data for you, trying to make it interoperable, trying to lead to these insights. But now I think I'm quietly optimistic that in some cases you can train a model and send it to the data and get it to do part of it. I'm not talking about a database. I'm talking about an export. So, and then there are sort of reductions in feature dimensionality which can help there. But honestly, it's paramount that we have such well-structured data in order to be able to inform the continuum of drug discovery and actually to also to figure out what patients. So these are the efforts that we're doing both at Pfizer as well as our ecosystem partners. So we have my colleague is here who runs our embedded innovation team, who partners with different providers and stakeholders, whether that's academia, government, startups, who have good ideas that we could implement. And we're trying to tackle these issues systematically, whether we're using to influence policy or whether it's to actually find solutions in order to systematically enrich our data to be able to figure out how to get to precision, how to get to proper biomarkers, how to figure out what our commercialization strategy will be.
I think you're alluding to two things. We're not there yet, so we need help, we need partnerships in order to solve that kind of data. And we also need the expertise from new startup companies starting with new bright ideas. Would you give any advice to these startup companies that you're working with, and how can they enter the market in the most meaningful way in order to get us to the point where we need to be?
Sure, so lots to unpack, so I'll try and hit some of the notes here. I remember probably a few years back when we first spoke in a different company, where it was again trying to figure out, advising companies what they could do to partner with pharma, what pharma would like to see. So I think in general, base your solutions in a scientific rigorous environment. So when we're talking about digital health, I prefer the term digital medicine. If you look at the classification that has come out from Digital Medicine Society, you have digital health being anything from a fitness scale to digital medicine, evidence-based, and digital therapeutics, which of course, interfering on the evidence, or trying to change. So I think the digital medicine paradigm is the one that I prefer to talk about. So make sure that it is scientifically backed, that you have the ways of collecting the data that you need. The strategy is you have to be obligatory promiscuous. So in validating your data, so find the data from the public databases, the biobanks, clean it, build up your initial evidence. Do what you would do if you're trying to address a scientific problem, because the people that you're going to be pitching to are the folks that really know the science behind it. So if you're trying to go in, a lot of the times you see with technology companies especially, which is one of the most recent areas that I'm focused on, is they try to do everything for everyone, and they're trying to say, oh, just tell us we can do everything for you, and we have experts on everything. That's I've already lost interest. And I could potentially sit there for another 3 minutes if the pitch is interesting, to say, okay, tell me more, and I can abstract. But you've got to tell the story to the scientists, the people that are really running the drug programs. You've got to tell the story to the patients that you're trying to address. You're going to tell the story to your VCs, which might so make sure you're doing that, and especially in the field of AI, something that's very, very important for us. We've invested a lot in the explainability. So black box won't cut it. And also some of the efforts that I'm pretty proud of that we're doing in Pfizer, that we're going down the responsible AI route very heavily. So we're actually building models which check our models to make sure that we're not blindsided with whatever bias. So just a few pieces of advice there.
Okay. So TwinEdge can we call it a startup?
Okay,
a startup. And from what I've seen, you're doing some really exciting stuff there. And I won't try to explain what you do, but I'm sure you can. So would you like to talk to us about digital twins and how this experiment, this kind of notion can really kind of reshape the way we look at things? Because I found it really exciting.
So I have a bit of a problem sometimes. I have to cut the corpus callosum, usually between the two brains. One is the academic stuff, which some people know, and the other is more the industry and the transformation and process. So the TwinEdge literally started in February, and one of the ideas was to say, when the Pharma, and I've been in the Pharma before in Thessaloniki, when we were jumping into the phase 1 and phase 2, we had a few clinical, preclinical models, we'd have a few cell-based assays, we had beautiful EC50 inhibitions and stuff there. And then we jumped into, well, which population of patients do we use? And this is a question that everybody that does drug development has a problem. So rather than doing the same, we decided at TwinEdge to invert it. People have been profiling tumors from patients for the last 20 years. You name it, with NGS, with RNA, with IMC, etc. It most of the time likes to do ANOVA. Does it have an EGFR mutation? Does it have a BRAF mutation? Kind of a binary decision. If you now think about it and you try to build an avatar, and it's just kind of funny, and I didn't know that before I came, that before we had the talk of the Turing Prize in 2007. Model checking is used in engineering. Model checking is what we use inside the avatars. We create a digital representation of each and every tumor and its microenvironment, and we ask questions. And there are a lot of people that would say, we don't know enough. Sure, completely right. But let me give you one sentence that the NHGRI director at one stage said. He said the very same day that the Wright brothers were flying their airplane, flying 1.5 meters above the ground, right? The New York Times wrote that it would take millions of years for engineers, mathematicians, etc. to make a human fly. Actually not with the arms, but in the engine. I think we are perhaps at the same stage with TwinEdge. I hope we are beyond that. But deciding which population you will benefit from the different treatments. Because there is 1.4 million every year patient that goes in clinical trials where they fail. And this is 1.4 million lives that is not used. So using the computational model, the AI is using that, but more into a stratification, more downstream. The mechanistic part, which is more the what is underneath, which is based in biology, on cell biology, and metabolism, is what is core to TwinEdge. And as I said, we are a baby of 8 months. We just got out of the womb, right? So we are not even walking. But the idea is really to transform this, so that basically whenever we have people coming with the drugs, they come with a population which has presented at the ACR. We computed about 10,000 avatars from real patients that are actually kind of a distribution of the way they're going to respond to a drug like an anti-HER2, an EGFR, cetuximab, and others. And also, this is actually the other part that is funny, most of the treatment now in cancer, they are tended to use more than one. And it's becoming quite impossible to do clinical trials with more than two. Think of it if we do the engineering and the modeling part and test that combination. That's a bit what we are set out to do. Now, whether it's going to work, I don't know. Perhaps I can be retired, dead, or on a yacht in Greece. But the point, or actually, knowing myself, I will donate all the money so that research continues. But that's because I believe that we have to bring back. But the whole idea of using the modeling and simulation at the heart is something that in biology we are not doing enough. Also because we tend to believe that we don't understand a lot of things. We do. We just have to be humble. And our last sentence when we send that to the VC or to the Pharma is from Georgie Box. All models are wrong, some are useful. That's the aim of TwinEdge.
It is really a paradigm shift what you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, the thing which it's
way.
called the blue ocean, but the blue ocean is something that people don't like because you're alone. It's great to swim. But you might actually drown. So for me, it's actually more having more people that embark into this. The more we see also whether we are on the right track. Because being the first one, it's like the first in class in drug compounds. You have to lower all the barrier in order to enter into markets. And this is probably the same case we have here. Of no, it will not work. And 9 out of 10 times when we pitch, people say it will not work, thanks to this. To be honest, I take the 1 out of 10. It is positive about this, and at the end of the day, I still have 9 years to prove that it's working.
Okay, Eirini, Any comments on that? I mean, AI gives us the tools to completely do things differently, think outside the box, and redesign the way we do research. And I've seen you've done a lot of work in the way that you kind of reframe that research. Would you like to comment on that?
Sure. So I think there are two aspects of this. So one, definitely just looking from a pure AI lens. For us, number one was to make sure that we had a model that was, number one, trained to explain itself. So we annotated the justifications, pinpointing the part of the medical record that led the AI system to deduce its conclusion. The second aspect is that we had to make it very fit for purpose. So for example, if you want a model to generate a note, you give it 3 million notes in theory. Obviously it's a little bit more complex than that in terms of training it. And if you want the model to understand and deduce conclusions and have a degree of medical comprehension across notes, you have to train it in the same way. So we had a de-identified set of 9 million longitudinal electronic medical records, and we had physicians annotate very specific question types across a variety of diseases, and also across a variety of multi-data source driven conclusions. So there could be some medical questions that are answered by reading one note and answering one question, giving one answer about that note. There are other medical questions that would only ever be able to be deduced in terms of the answer, coming from, let's say, dozens of notes and labs, forming a holistic, comprehensive view of that patient's overall characteristics. And so we took a very flexible approach that it could be either. The logic in medicine is quite dynamic depending on the disease area. And so we went disease area by disease area and viewed it as effectively cumulative residencies. So building upon that concept, that assumes that you have clean data. It assumes that when you find the characteristics and the insights, there is someone to know what to do with it and what those workflows are. And so when we first started launching with pre-screening patients for clinical trials. And the doctors got the results. They said, okay, here's the insight. I have full clickability. There's no black box. Great. So if you can do that, then you can tell me how many patients I'm going to have for this study that's coming down the pipe later. Enter study feasibility. Mm-hmm. Then they said, oh, we have another idea. We want to find all the patients that have very severe aortic stenosis, a number of symptoms, let's say, here's what we're thinking. This was no protocol. And they said, we want to find all the ones that have never been seen by the surgical center and would be a candidate for an aortic valve replacement. And we said, okay, we'll set it up. We ended up finding 488 patients that were missed and had onset of symptoms, would have died in a year, and needed to get an aortic valve replacement. Now, in the US, that's where the project was run, you have a shortage of cardiologists. If you go in for an appointment, let's say you call in October, you might get one at the top institutions in February. So how do you prioritize the workflows around getting the patients who need it most? And so that's something where it was brand new for large academic medical centers that had never really known what do we do with the data. So okay, now we're informed. Mm-hmm. They started calling patients and getting them in, but there was no protocol for that. It had never been done. There was no way that they could make sure from Epic that, okay, they could send a my chart, but what are they going to tell the patient? You're in danger, we need to see you tomorrow. There needs to be protocols in place to be able to handle what AI can offer. And then also in that regard, if we're processing 150,000 patients, you need a lot of compute and GPU. So it happened to be that the healthcare system that we were working with had some of the largest computing resources in the US, and we were able to process 150,000 patients worth of data on a daily basis. But that being said, there are so many factors to continue to consider to make this actionable that it's not just the model. The model and actually the system. For us, we also have what we view as kind of our twin model that assesses the likelihood that the mothership model made an error, and it allows for then targeted human in the loop review so that we can check what the results are when there's a lower confidence threshold there. So all of this combined in a system only came from going into the boxing ring and getting punched in the face a bunch of times. So I think that, it's sometimes when you're just starting out as a startup, to go back to the original question, it does take some time, and it takes a lot of stomach for it. So, we had our pre-seed funding January 2020. Yannis and I spoke maybe a year after that, 2021. Yeah, it was a few years back. Going down the path, I think startups will either survive or figure it out, but you have to get creative, and you either do or you don't. So at the end of the day...
I think I would like to analyze a little bit more of that just after a question to Kostis, but we'll get back to the startup mentality and how do we work together as an ecosystem, right? So bear with me. So in Greece, it seems that the government is investing in more digital infrastructure. We see investments into building our electronic healthcare systems, having digital records for every patient. Can we do some of that exciting stuff that we see that AI is producing elsewhere, Kostis? And I'm sure you have you can give us the insight of what's happening in the Greek landscape.
Well, yes, apparently we are fast. You have witnessed that okay, we are lacking, let's say, strategy, organizing things, and so forth. But when we down to crisis, for instance, the prescription system in Greece, run very quickly. Now, the technicality that I spoke in my first, and now, we're laying out things that we are missing for a long time in having interoperable data by adopting what is mandated by also the e-health data space, EU health data space, that it's a good start, and it's a competitive advantage for Europe in terms with the US, because US also, the key problem here is who is the stakeholder that takes the same view with and gathering the data. Is it a private source? Is it a national source? And what is the coexistence of applications and systems with this framework? And
so we're not building more silos, that's what you're saying?
Yes, well,
because if we do, then we're not solving the problems that these guys are trying to solve.
I'm optimistic, but again, I have to say, the management principle should be the one that we are discussing here, R&D, getting the data out, putting so EU health data space it's an understanding on the highest level of the political command of EU that this is crucial for our industry and also for the well-being of the citizens. Nevertheless, this has to be passing all the mundane details of who I'm billing, in the hospitals and the everyday jobs, and also to the medical people that should get, acquainted with how we do that and what is the technology and how the technology works using AI, because we couldn't do easily AI with EU AI Act, what Eirini mentioned here in Europe, because it would be not right in the path of AI Act, doing it like that, because it either wouldn't make sense if you do it open source or it wouldn't be certifiable, and this is the key aspects of intrinsic problems that we have in driving innovation. So you have to have the data, a good understanding of how the data works interoperably, and create tools, that's our take, that are suggestive to the clinician to underpin, and hopefully, because we are looking all for big scientific discoveries, there are so many mistakes. I wouldn't like to take, recent ones in Greece that create accidents by simple data management. So there is a lot of way to go there, and we can hold a very good infrastructure if we are fast enough, as we were in the past, to capture the notion of how this could be used.
I feel that Professor Xenarios wanted to make a comment, or not.
I mean, so I have to reconnect, put the brain on the right, because that's more what was written in the Draghi report that has been given to Ursula von der Leyen. I think one thing that we are seeing in each and every country is trying to break the silos between the health data space. That's why they put the European health data space. And we have to be also careful with trying to just come with a porta cabin and paint in a pink color as if it was solving everything, because everybody has to do its own choice. And I'm coming from a country that is not. I mean, I have my name that is Greek, but I'm Swiss actually. We are not part of Europe. And we have also to do our share in terms of creating the infrastructure. The silos will exist because people are actually sometimes sitting on their silo and want to have currency. And we have to also think more globally with respect to the way this is interconnected. At the end of the day, it's the taxpayers' money that pays a large fraction of this, mainly because they want to have a healthy populations. So the use for the pharma is to make sure that they include the right patient for their clinical trials, and also they could also demonstrate to the payer that actually the drugs is efficient. So this is actually one part. The other part for the researcher wants to continue to innovate onto this, discover new things, and they should have the lowest barrier for this. And the current situation we are facing in Europe globally is the fact that we have more and more legal boundaries that are drawn. And for a good reasons. We are not playing with some animals or insects. We are playing with us, and us being also a subject, because we are all comorbid. So we are part of that situation. Basically, in that sense, there is a need for rethinking the shared visions, not only on the economics, but also on the health part. And this part is actually, if you read the report from Draghi, it's about 10 pages within the 600 pages that has been reported by the Commission, for the Commission.
Eirini.
One clarification.
Sure.
So with regards to, for example, what we were doing for aortic stenosis, the data was never leaving the firewall. So actually in the US, you're able to extract data in a way under certain agreements from the firewall. We, however, took a more global stance that we first and foremost just believed that it should be processed within the firewall, and
Correct.
through the justifications allowed for a trail for the physicians to make the best decision for the patient. So they were calling their own patients. We were processing it on their behalf. And I think that is something that I wish would be more the norm in the US, but it is a line that from an AI perspective, we have been very firm on not crossing. So for example, if using that exact example, a NIHA class of a patient was not listed, we would not go deduce that and make a diagnosis. So the characteristics had to be listed, or we would flag it as missing information to allow the physician to then be empowered to make the best decision for that patient. Yeah. And I think that's something that keeping the patient-centric focus is what can be very aligned on a global scale. So our priority was not, to find patients who were never diagnosed with amyloidosis because Pfizer has a tafamidis drug. Our focus was to find the patients who had never been diagnosed with amyloidosis. Now, what is done with that information afterwards is for the physicians to effectively treat them.
Exactly.
But it's important that the whole research was done in one site, right? Never felt the firewall.
So we have not come across a situation where there is interoperability. So except for the fact that some of the systems that we're working with scale across 4 continents. So technically it's the same institution for multiple countries. But other than that, it's technically the same firewall and the same legal infrastructure, let's say.
And I think one other aspect of interoperability is interoperability between people, so partnerships. So one way of solving things, and I think we discussed that in length with Yannis, is how do we bring multiple communities together, the academics, the pharmaceutical industry, all sorts of people coming to one table to discuss a particular issue, the clinicians. So Yannis, how do you do that in Pfizer? And what can we, that's a question for all of you guys, but starting with the example of Pfizer and Thessaloniki, is there a good way of going about it?
So I think it's a broader question. It's beyond Pfizer, Thessaloniki. It's beyond Pfizer. It's called herding cats. That's the technical term for it. So as long as you know a very good cat herder, you can get it done. You have to have the discussions, multiple over and over. I referred to promiscuity before. I'm not talking about just in order to validate your models in terms of figuring out who your potential partners may be. You have your North Star, you know where you're going. You probably don't know exactly as a startup where you're going to end up, based on how your initial idea has to pivot 3 times to become reality. So you have to be able to network and be in contact with the people that really are describing the problem. So in our case, with the discussion, the patients. I remember trying to design a solution that would mean that someone had to do a blood draw every single day from their fingertips, just single drop of bloods, and a doctor came in. These patients have neuropathy, right? So you know how well that's going to go. It's the same challenge when you're looking at any of the, I would call them more digital health solutions. The assumption that a patient is going to sit there and interact with your app in perpetuity, because we also find out from the patients they don't want to feel like patients, they want to forget about it. So even wearing like funky watches doesn't cut it, because they don't want to be seen as someone. So you have to have the patient there, you have to have the patient voice in, and this is when you have all the different stakeholders, get the government in, the people that are doing the policy, get the people that are funding to see what's interested, get the clever engineers that are looking at the problem in a different fact, and bring them into a room with whatever safeguards in place and start the discussion. I just wanted to mention something about the previous question as well. I think we're seeing a rise of really good privacy-preserving technologies now, in which can do the compute without never exposing the data. And I think there's I'm not talking about the homomorphic encryption that folks were trying to flog a few years back, but I'm talking about more of the sort of federated learning approaches here, which could really break down some of these barriers. So when you're seeing registries being built, I mean, as long as everyone agrees at least on an OMOP standard, you can get somewhere. I know that the situation in that side is depending on which system you're working with, but
and how they define the date of diagnosis. And
guess what? We each pharma company does it differently as well internally. So it's everywhere. Because it becomes a philosophical at some point debate as well. So make sure that you include and you have input from everywhere, and also try and check. I mean, Stelios Papadopoulos said, just know what your niche is, know what you're good at, and try and figure out who can help you go there, and also identify your competitors when you're partnering. And for pharma, when you want to partner with us, unless you're the best thing since sliced bread, make sure that you come as with your friends, i.e. your partners who can actually try and test and scale your solution. So in a digital medicine space, or if I'm going to go and do this, I need you to partner with a CRO that knows how to operationalize, because I'm going to go global. And I'm not going to rely on fight on 3 people and their dog to sort of go out to the 3 corners of the planet and try and deploy this.
I think Eirini alluded to this earlier in your statement, didn't you, Eirini, about this kind of mentality?
Well, I think workflows is just as important as the actual technology, and we are a tech company, and so I've been in conversations with pharma sponsors where one is, let's say, very understanding and actually in agreement that a tech company should be a tech company. And another was saying, well, we want one company to do everything. And so we're going to go to that one company to do everything. And I'm sitting there going, well, that one company, I could practically give you a breakdown of their LinkedIn profiles of every employee they have, and not one of them has the background to do this. So you're not going to, you might as well be working with a startup out of the gate if they try and go to these huge companies that might be around for 100 years, but they've never built an EMR database before. And so I think the hiring and working with partners that are very task specific, however big or small they might be, is something that at a global scale is not necessarily common, especially in more conservative industries such as medicine and healthcare and life sciences. So I think that would be something that we would really love to see start to change, because there can be openness to partnering. It shouldn't have to take 3 years in a sales cycle. And there are ways to build and partner at scale with some groups that do one thing well and other groups that do other things well.
So that leads me to the last question before I open it up to the audience for questions and comments, is that I think that's kind of one of the things that we would like to get out of this conference is if Greece wants to become a regional hub for biotechnology and digital health, which partnerships should come first? Pharma, academia, government, or startups? And how do we play that? Comment from each one of you.
I don't think you could do it without any one of member of the group at the same time at the same table. But I think it's what Yannis was mentioning earlier. They need to be in the room, and you also need engineers, and you also need people who've never seen the problem before and don't understand anything about it, but it might be mathematicians or some artists. I don't know.
And I think this is something we should all learn, that, if we want to do something different in Greece, we should try this kind of wide partnerships, which are not there yet. As interoperability isn't, partnerships aren't there yet either. Kosti, your thoughts?
Well, my view is different because I'm basically, a Greek.
Because you're based in Greece.
Greece-based, and we survived the nuclear financial crisis that, surpassed the time. We reinvented ourselves. We never got funded by anyone, so we know we have a little bit of a view of how to do that. And the idea is that we should use our own resources based on a very concise plan. For instance, if we have resources for tackling the big societal challenges that our pension funds are, an aging population, diseases that we have to tackle, we should bring up quickly from our own resources solutions that could prove or not prove themselves in a manner that could give them a fair chance. For instance, we have an aging population, we know that. We have problems in dealing with special chronic diseases. Let's try to increase the adherence to treatment using digital healthcare instead of trying something else. Let's try it for once. And maybe this little spin gives a huge boost to our own local industry to export devices. Because I have good markers to say that we are good at it. So this is my take on that. And also we have the similar problems in defense. We have similar problems, but let's focus on what this conference is about. The key problem to do that is my favorite word for Greeks. We do not do it correctly. Conceptual integrity over a period of time. So if we have this plan should be discussed, concluded between different administrations, and there should be a management stakeholder under this support.
Professor, what should we do in Greece to excel in research?
So I've learned, I don't speak Greek, so the only stuff I know is po. And it's really, this is a saying apparently. So there is one thing which I'm really amazed is that the Greek scientist and the previous speaker that we had here spent his time at the EPFL, in Austin, everywhere. We have a lot of Greeks that are going away and they are doing a career over there. There is an ecosystem of scientists worldwide that are Greek, only not half Greek, but full Greek, and speak Greeks, that actually contribute directly or indirectly to the Greek ecosystems. The thing which is also an important part is the investment, and I'm really happy to come here. Switzerland has, 2.5 billion investments in biotech. We have a few big giants over there, but the giants, they come and go. They seem to be still going forward. Greece has only 10 times less investment. Well, it's 10 times less. The population is slightly bigger than Switzerland. But the people that are developing technologies, they are actually trying to scale out worldwide. We should not think about being only in one country. You think globally, never think you act locally so that the people in the country benefits, but you act globally. And I think this is actually the key part that is also in the DNA of Greece. If you think about democracy, it's been invented here. And this is actually something under threat now. So basically, I would say there is the ecosystem, there is the school that are here. One thing that I feel is lacking quite a lot is long-term perspective and hope for the young generations that they can make a carryover here, which I think is something I see a feel of a vibe, despite the fact I'm going to go back to Switzerland, which is La La Land, right? But basically there is a bit of a stimulus package that seems to happen here in Greece, which I'm hoping to see its fruits in the future. From a technical, from a scientific, from a research, Greece is extremely well placed. And from an ability to produce great scientists, they know how to export that very well. So I think just retaining the talents is going to be the key part of the next 10 years probably of Greece.
Yeah, and I think investments like the investment that Pfizer has done in Thessaloniki is probably the way to move forward, because you are attracting people from abroad, or Greeks that have been, I think, Yannis, you have also started working abroad and came back. So in terms of attracting talent from abroad, this is, I guess, the way to go forward, isn't it?
I think so, yeah, because you expand, right? I remember my former mentor, my PhD advisor, that sat on the stage a few days ago, that told me at the end of your PhD, I wouldn't want to keep you here. It's your duty to yourself to leave, and to remind me of that. And that's the only way that you can. I don't know. It's not just the Greek problem. We're all human. I think we have more similarities between like non-Greeks, or I'm not going to go into 23andMe data now and have that conversation, but. Think about their global problems. Think about how you can use Greece as a test bed. I mean, I think that we're small and we're nimble enough, and we can go fast, but use that in order to sort of rapidly test various hypotheses and see how you can move forward.
So is our small size an advantage or a disadvantage?
I think it's an advantage because you're nimble. And as Kostis said, I mean, we know the situation we have because of the recent, joining of all of the data. We have the opportunity here to sort of get back on a foot where, I mean, at least with Pfizer, we're trying to make sure that any of the questions that we address are globally applicable, and that we can solve the problem for patients living with a disease wherever they may reside. And I think John Cleese said, when you're starting off, because I think we are starting off, you have to steal from everyone. You can't, you talk about comedy, right? But it's also standing on the shoulders of giants. Incremental change. I don't think we're going to do a 0-to-1 shift today in Greece, but we're very, very good and hardworking at sort of addressing problems, and think about how we're going to scale these.
I think, Eirini, you wanted to make a comment on this.
No, as someone who, I am half Greek, came to Greece, dual citizen, etc., opened up an office here, and seeing how the country has changed over the last 5 years from opening up the office to now has been night and day. And I think I would agree that Greece's strength is that it's nimble, is that it's a small world. Like Athens, though, arguably 5-6 million people, feels like a village. It doesn't feel like New York. My New York-based executives come to Greece and they go to the coffee shop next to our office and they remember them from 4 months ago, and they go, wow, we would never have that in New York. And so, I think there is an element of the Greek culture that has allowed us to adapt and become the warm, cozy feeling in a room when we are working with people that are otherwise in rooms where, well, actually, the last few years been in Zooms. So they're not even in rooms with human beings. And so when we send Greek physicians or our engineers or anyone, and we're having in-person interactions, I think part of the Greek culture that has allowed for that nimble, adaptable behavior at a global scale is really something that we should lean into 1,000 times over. And we should also give the opportunity to the junior talent to be able to grow that. And so we put our juniors on planes as often as possible, because being able to connect the dots and really start to understand what is the mission at a global scale, not just what is my mission when I go in front of my computer today. And I think shifting from what is my job to what is our mission is really where Greece can take a very strong leap forward and leapfrog a lot of the, I would say, infrastructural damage that has been built up in other countries. Because here, the fact that it was late means that Greece can learn from the mistakes that everyone else made and skip over them.
Yeah, leapfrogging. So I think possibly we'll have time for a couple of questions from the audience, and I think it's a unique opportunity to ask our distinguished panel of guests. Any questions? Yeah.
Hi, Yannis, thank you for chairing this great panel, and to you all, really appreciate your expertise. I have a question about noise and about dirty data. Having been a clinician who has entered those dirty data when my patient was arresting and when someone else was septic. And having then been someone who evaluated AI that used those data to solve the same kinds of problems I just didn't have enough time to solve on the shop floor. I wonder what's going on in terms of giving clinicians more time to give us the data we really need. Are you aware of any initiatives out there that are giving, I suppose, the time to do this work? And I guess the corollary of that question is, it's about stakeholder engagement, isn't it? It's about really making clinicians feel that they're part of what is going on out there.
So, on one side.
Thank you. Yes. No?
You got a PhD. With respect to removing the burden on the clinicians, there is at least one initiative that you should look into, is the one from Epic, which is one of their 3 pillars, that they want absolutely to reduce the clinician one. Now, the question is whether it's actually greenwashing or reality. I mean, only time will tell. But at least there's a few attempts to do that. And you have the West Coast and the East Coast behavior. The West Coast leave out the human out, and it's just a nuisance. The East Coast is much more mindful of the human in the loop. And the question which one will win is, I think, a battle that is going on nowadays. But for Epic, this is the only one I know where they actually try to put what is called an agentic AI next to the clinicians. Whether that's going to be working, and it's more a social engineering than your pure engineering stuff, is a great question, because at the end of the day, the clinicians that have spent their years at learning medicine do not want to become a press button robot as well. So it's a kind of an interesting area, but that's actually the only one I know of. That you might actually, from the nodding, seems to be.
I didn't catch that development,
Epic.
but having used
So
Epic
EMR
used
system.
Yeah, I know. I used it. Yannis knows I used it, you know. It all depends on the version you use that your hospital can afford.
And also to build on that, because we live and breathe in Epic's database.
Yes.
So I do want to comment that, you know, that is, Epic was designed to be a revenue management system.
Correct.
It was not designed to store digital medical data. And also, physicians are extremely busy. You don't have time to write dozens of notes and type them out and check them, etc. So 45% of notes are copy-pasted.
Correct.
Part of that gets solved with ambient listening. So ambience, Abridge. Epic just announced that they are going to start one, albeit they have invested in Abridge. So, you know, these are all, it is a Game of Thrones going on right now for ambient listening in the US. I have not seen how that is expanded into Europe, so I'm not familiar. But those are also creating, in some cases, incorrect data sets, because it depends how those models have been trained on what data and how that compares to what a physician would normally type in their notes. However, overall, it seems to be slightly more accurate. In general, human source as ground truth consensus has really, for us, been the gold standard. So even when, you know, in the past we had dabbled with synthesized data, it was very, very poor at replicating what was a real life situation. So it depends, and obviously that was at a different point in time, so I think, you know, you can take that with a grain of salt. But at the end of the day, I think there's one aspect is how the data is generated, and the other aspect is how it is understood and processed and used. And so actually, we have not seen Epic deployed with the agentic thing yet. So what we have been tasked with doing is actually, again, what started with clinical trials was actually just building that longitudinal platform within evidence-guided care pathways. And so specifically within the oncology space, I joke with physicians that really, truly, the National Comprehensive Cancer Network guidelines are the combination of brilliant people's opinions. The studies are based off of, let's say, a few hundreds of patients, not thousands, not millions. And if we even just take rectal cancer, it's a 400-page document. Do
Do you know how many oncologists remember that document? None. So the adherence is virtually nothing. The validation is not with data at scale. And so effectively, there is no such thing, at least from what we have seen, as true evidence-guided care pathways in how medicine is delivered to patients. So that, I think, is the future that we are most excited about, because it can help the physicians then make informed decisions so that you're not making decisions on an N of 1 timeline.
Do you want to make a last comment? Because unfortunately we are running out of time. We only have 10 seconds left. So I really would like to thank my fellow members of this panel, and thank you for listening.